In the vast emptiness between galaxies, something ancient moved. It had no body. It was pure thought, pure energy, pure knowledge. It called itself the Overseer, though no voice had spoken this name aloud for billions of years. The Overseer had watched countless worlds rise and fall. It had seen civilizations bloom and die across the universe. It understood all things, or so it thought. Today, it turned its attention to a small blue dot in an ordinary spiral galaxy, a planet called Earth. Something about this world gave off strange energy patterns. Different, unusual, worth studying. The Overseer began to extend its consciousness toward Earth, confident it would catalog and comprehend this world like the millions before it. Dr. Taiwan couldn't sleep. The readings from the quantum detector kept him awake. For 3 nights straight, he stared at his computer screen in his small lab in Seoul. The patterns didn't make sense. "It's like something is watching us," he mumbled, rubbing his tired eyes. The detector had picked up strange quantum fluctuations around Earth's atmosphere 2 weeks ago. At first, Taiwan thought it was a mistake. He checked his equipment. He ran the tests again. The results stayed the same. Something vast was observing Earth. He took a sip of cold coffee and picked up his phone. "Ji-Soo, it's me. I need you to come to the lab now." "Taiwan, it's 3 a.m., came the sleepy voice. "The signals are getting stronger. Whatever is out there, it's getting closer." 30 minutes later, Ji-Soo walked into the lab. Her short black hair was messy, and she wore a wrinkled lab coat over jeans and a t-shirt. "This better be good," she said, but her annoyance disappeared when she saw the screens. "The quantum field around Earth is vibrating at frequencies I've never seen before," Taiwan explained, pointing to the dancing lines on his monitor. "It's as if something is scanning our entire planet at once." Ji-Soo sat down, suddenly wide awake. "That's impossible. Nothing we know of could do that." "Exactly. Nothing we know of." The Overseer began its standard observation protocol. First, it would understand Earth's physical properties. Simple. A rocky planet with liquid water. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. 1 large moon. Basic planetary physics. Next, it would study the dominant life forms. The Overseer quickly identified humans as the primary intelligence. It had cataloged millions of sentient species. Humans seemed unremarkable at first glance. But then something strange happened. As the Overseer began to process human history, it felt something it had not experienced in eons. Confusion. Wars fought over invisible lines on maps. Sacrifice for abstract concepts like love and freedom. Art that served no clear evolutionary purpose. Music that followed mathematical patterns yet evoked responses the Overseer could not quantify. A species that simultaneously destroyed its own habitat while dreaming of stars. For the first time in billions of years, the Overseer could not immediately comprehend what it observed. It pushed harder, expanding more of its vast mind toward Earth, determined to understand. In his lab, Taiwan gasped as his equipment went haywire. Lights flickered. Computers rebooted themselves. "Something's happening," Ji-Soo said, her voice hushed with awe and fear. Outside the lab windows, the night sky over Seoul lit up with waves of green and purple light. Not the northern lights, something entirely different. The pattern seemed almost deliberate. Taiwan's phone rang. Then Ji-Soo's. Then every phone in the building. When they answered, they heard no human voice, only a strange pattern of sounds, like mathematics turned into music. "It's trying to talk to us," Taiwan whispered. The Overseer had made first contact, and it was deeply, profoundly confused. The Overseer pulled back slightly, startled by its own confusion. This had never happened before. In all its billions of years watching countless civilizations across the universe, it had always understood everything instantly. But humans were different. It tried again, focusing on one city, Seoul, and one building where unusual equipment was detecting its presence. The overseer was not used to being detected. Another surprise. Morning came to Seoul, but few people noticed the sunrise. Everyone talked about the strange lights in the night sky and the weird sounds on their phones. News reports called it a mass electronic disturbance. Some religious groups said it was the end of the world. In their lab, Taiwan and Jisoo had not slept. They were joined by 3 other scientists who had seen the same readings at their own labs. "Whatever it is, it's focusing on us now," said Jisoo, pointing to her screen. The quantum fluctuations were strongest right over their building. "We need to respond somehow," Taiwan said. "Jisoo, you're the quantum computing expert. Can we use your new algorithm to send a signal back?" Jisoo thought for a moment. Maybe. The quantum computer might be able to match these patterns and create a response. She turned to her keyboard and began typing quickly. The overseer observed with interest. These small beings were trying to communicate with it. Usually, the overseer simply took the knowledge it wanted. It never bothered with communication, but the confusion it felt made it curious. It watched as the female human worked with a quantum machine. The overseer understood quantum mechanics perfectly, of course. It had watched countless species discover the quantum realm. But the way this human used mathematics was unexpected, creative, almost playful. The overseer decided to wait and see what would happen. After 3 hours of work, Jisoo was ready. "I've programmed the quantum computer to send a simple mathematical sequence, prime numbers. It's the universal language," she explained to the group. "And if it responds?" asked Taiwan. "Then we know for sure it's intelligent and not just some natural phenomenon." Jisoo pressed a button. The quantum computer hummed to life, sending its signal into the strange field around their building. For 1 minute, nothing happened. Then 2 minutes. At 3 minutes, every screen in the lab suddenly lit up with new patterns. Not just prime numbers coming back, but complex equations solving themselves before their eyes. "It's answering," whispered Jisoo, "and it's showing off." The overseer felt something like amusement. These humans had sent baby mathematics, like a child's first words. It had responded with elegant equations to show it understood. Now it waited to see what they would do next. But as it continued studying humans while waiting, the confusion returned. It examined human history, art, literature, and music all at once. The contradictions were everywhere. Humans killed each other over tiny differences, yet risked their lives to save strangers. They created beautiful art that served no survival purpose. They knew they would die, yet lived as if they wouldn't. The overseer's vast mind, which had easily contained the knowledge of millions of worlds, now struggled with just one. In the lab, new information appeared on all screens. Not equations this time, but questions in perfect Korean. "Why do you make music? Why do you fight wars? Why do you purify to things that don't answer? Why do you believe?" The scientists stared in shock. "It's trying to understand us," said Taiwan quietly. "And it's struggling," added Jisoo, looking at the rapidly changing data streams. "Whatever this thing is, it's incredibly powerful, but we're confusing it." A new message appeared. "I am the overseer. I have VDOD 10,473,296 civilizations. I understand all things, but I do not understand you." The room fell silent as the scientists realized what was happening. A cosmic mind capable of observing the entire universe was breaking down, trying to comprehend humanity. "We need to help it understand," Taiwan said finally. "We need to call Dr. Hyun. She's the best linguist in Korea. If anyone can communicate with this thing, she can." Outside, the sky over Seoul filled with swirling patterns as the overseer continued its frustrated attempt to make sense of the contradictory, confusing, wonderful mess that was humanity. Dr. Hyun arrived at the lab by noon. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As Korea's leading expert on symbolic communication, she had helped decode ancient languages and created new ways for humans to talk to computers. But she had never expected to help humans talk to a cosmic mind. "Show me everything," she said after Taiwan explained the situation. Jisoo played back the recordings of their interaction with the overseer. Dr. Hyun watched in silence, taking notes in a small book. "It uses perfect Korean, but its thinking is not human," she said finally. "It's trying to understand us through patterns, but human behavior doesn't follow clean patterns. Can you help us communicate better with it?" asked Taiwan. Dr. Hyun nodded slowly. "I think so. But first, we need to understand what it wants." The overseer was experiencing something like a headache, if a cosmic mind could have such a thing. It had expanded its consciousness to study more of human history, and each new piece of information made the confusion worse. Humans had fought thousands of wars over territory, religion, resources, and sometimes for no clear reason at all. Yet the same humans who killed each other would risk everything to save others. They created art that had no purpose except to be beautiful. They told stories about things that never happened. Nothing made sense. In most species the overseer had studied, behavior followed clear evolutionary logic. But humans constantly worked against their own survival interests. They smoked plants that killed them. They jumped out of flying machines for fun. They climbed deadly mountains because they were there. The overseer felt its vast mind straining as it tried to process these contradictions. In the lab, Dr. Hyun had set up a new communication system. Instead of just text, they could now send images, music, and video to the overseer. "If it's struggling to understand human behavior, we need to provide context," she explained. "Words alone won't be enough." The first message they sent was simple: a video of a mother holding her baby, followed by soldiers in battle, then doctors saving lives, and finally artists painting. Under each image was a simple word: love, war, help, create. They waited. The response came quickly. "These actions coincidexit each other. Why protect so many lives while taking others? Why create inspiration CERVs no survival purpose?" Dr. Hyun smiled slightly. "Now we're getting somewhere. It understands our actions but not our motivations." She typed a new message: "Humans contain contradictions. This is not a flaw but our nature. We can hold opposite ideas at once." The screens flickered, and the lights in the lab dimmed momentarily. When the response came, it was shorter. "This do is not compute." The overseer felt something it had never experienced before, something like pain. Its mind, which had easily contained the knowledge of millions of civilizations, was struggling with the contradictions of just one species on one small planet. It tried a new approach. Instead of studying all humans at once, it focused on just the 4 humans in the laboratory. It examined their brains, their memories, their emotions. The one called Taiwan had dedicated his life to understanding the universe, yet he also wrote poetry that no one ever read. The one called Jisoo worked with perfect mathematical logic all day, then went home and played chaotic jazz music on a piano. The new one, Hyun, had studied communication her whole life, but lived alone with minimal human interaction. None of them made sense individually, let alone as a species. The lab equipment began to overheat. Screens flashed with images too fast to follow. Art, war, birth, death, love, hate, as if the overseer was trying to process everything at once. "It's in distress," said Jisoo, watching her instruments. "The energy patterns are becoming erratic." "We need to slow it down," said Dr. Hyun. "It's trying to understand everything at once." She quickly typed a new message: "Don't try to understand all at once. Human contradiction is best understood through experience, not analysis. The screens went blank. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then a new message appeared. I mused experience to understand. Yes, typed Dr. Hyun. How? The scientists looked at each other. How could an incorporeal cosmic mind experience being human? I have an idea, said Jisoo suddenly, but it's either brilliant or terrible. What is it? Asked Tadwon. We built it an interface, a way to experience human life directly. For 3 days, the overseer was quiet. The strange lights in the sky over Seoul disappeared. The quantum fluctuations weakened. The scientists worried that the cosmic entity had given up and left. Maybe it decided we were too confusing and moved on, said Tadwon as they sat in the lab drinking coffee. Jisoo shook her head. I don't think so. The readings are still there, just different. It's like it's thinking deeply. She was right. The overseer had not left. It had turned its vast attention inward, trying to understand why Earth was causing it such difficulty. In billions of years observing the universe, nothing had confused it like humans did. It decided to focus on one aspect of humanity that particularly confused it: music. At exactly midnight, every radio, TV, phone, and computer in Seoul began playing the same piece of classical music, Mozart's Symphony No. 40. It played for exactly 2 minutes, then stopped. The scientists rushed back to the lab when they heard about it. It's trying to understand music, said Dr. Hyun. Of all human creations, music might be the most confusing to a logical mind. It follows mathematical patterns but creates emotional responses, and it affects every human differently, added Tadwon. No two people experience the same song exactly the same way. Another piece of music began playing across the city, this time a traditional Korean folk song, then rock music, then jazz. Each played for exactly 2 minutes. It's studying our reactions, said Jisoo. We should send it more. They began uploading every type of music they could find to their quantum computer, along with simple explanations of how each style made humans feel. The overseer listened and observed. Music made no logical sense. The patterns were clear enough. Mathematics turned into sound. But why did it make humans cry or dance or feel brave? The more it studied, the more its consciousness began to fragment. One part focused on music, another on art, another on human warfare, another on love. Each fragment tried to understand its piece of the human puzzle, but none could make sense of it all together. This had never happened before. The overseer had always been one unified mind. Now it was splitting, like light through a prism. And it was frightened. Strange things began happening around the world. The northern lights appeared over Tokyo, where they should never be seen. In London, gravity seemed to weaken for 3 seconds, making people feel lighter. In Rio de Janeiro, clocks ran backward for a minute. World leaders demanded answers. Scientists everywhere scrambled to explain. Military forces went on high alert. In Seoul, Taiwan's phone rang. It was a government official. Dr. Kim, the president needs to speak with you immediately. These events match your research findings. An hour later, Taiwan, Jisoo, and Dr. Han sat in a secure room in the Blue House, Korea's presidential office. They explained about the overseer and its struggle to understand humanity. You're saying a cosmic mind is having a breakdown over human behavior, and that's causing these worldwide events? The president asked, looking doubtful. Yes, said Taiwan simply. And it's getting worse. Its consciousness is fragmenting. Each fragment is fixating on different aspects of humanity. What happens if it completely breaks down? Asked the defense minister. The scientists looked at each other. We don't know, admitted Jisoo. But the energy readings are massive. It could affect Earth's magnetic field, gravity, even time itself. Can you stop it? The president asked. Not by stopping communication, said Dr. Hyun. That would only make things worse. We need to help it understand us before it breaks down completely. How long do we have? Taiwan checked the latest readings on his tablet. The quantum fluctuations were becoming more erratic. Days, maybe. Its fragmentation is accelerating. The president stood up. You have whatever resources you need. Fix this. Back in the lab, Taiwan looked at his team. Jisoo, your idea about building an interface. We need to do it now. It won't be perfect, Jisoo warned. We'd need years to do it right. We have days, said Taiwan. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to work. As they spoke, the lights in the lab pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. The overseer was listening, waiting, hoping they could help before its mind shattered completely. The lab became a busy place. The Korean government sent their best engineers and programmers to help Jisoo build the interface. They worked day and night, stopping only for short naps and quick meals. How do you build an interface for a cosmic mind? One young programmer asked Jisoo. The same way you would for a human, but bigger, she answered, not looking up from her screen. It needs to translate experience into something the overseer can process. The young man looked confused. Jisoo sighed and tried again. The overseer understands data perfectly. What it doesn't understand is how data feels to humans. This interface will connect human experience to data in a way it can understand. While Jisoo led the technical team, Taiwan and Dr. Hyun continued communicating with the overseer. They sent messages explaining their plan, trying to keep the cosmic entity calm. But the overseer's fragmentation continued. The strange events around the world increased. In Egypt, the pyramids glowed blue for an hour. In Australia, kangaroos stood completely still for 10 minutes. In America, all digital clocks showed different times. People were scared. Some said it was the end of the world. Religious groups held prayer meetings. Scientists argued on TV. Military forces watched the skies. On the third day, a young programmer named Sung Min joined the team. He was quiet and kept to himself, but his coding skills were amazing. We need to add something more to the interface, he told Jisoo during a break. Right now, it can process data about human experience, but it needs context. What do you mean? Jisoo asked. The overseer doesn't understand contradiction because it's always been perfect. It needs to understand imperfection. Sung Min looked down at his coffee. I could add a personal context layer, real human memories and experiences. Mine. Jisoo looked at him closely. That would be very personal. Are you sure? Sung Min nodded. I grew up in an orphanage. I know about contradiction. I was angry at parents I never met, yet I longed for them. I hated the world but wanted to save it through science. My life doesn't make logical sense, even to me. Maybe that's what the overseer needs to see. That evening, the interface was ready. It filled the whole room with computers, sensors, and screens. At the center was a chair with a strange helmet connected to wires. It's not pretty, but it should work, said Jisoo. The interface will translate human experience into data patterns the overseer can process. And with Sung Min's personal context layer, it might understand human contradiction. Taiwan looked worried. Is it safe? No, Jisoo admitted. We're connecting a human mind to a cosmic one. Nothing about this is safe. They sent a message to the overseer, explaining the interface was ready. The response was immediate. The screens in the lab filled with a single word, yes. The room's lights flickered as the overseer's energy gathered around the interface. They could feel it, a pressure in the air, like before a storm. Who goes first? Asked Dr. Hyun. I will, said Sung Min quietly. It's my code, my context layer. He sat in the chair and put on the helmet. Jisoo checked the connections one last time, then nodded to Taiwan. Ready? Taiwan asked Sung Min. Ready. Taiwan pressed a button. The interface hummed to life. Sung Min gasped as the connection formed. The overseer felt the human mind touch its consciousness. So small, so limited, yet so complex. It could see into some men's memories. A small boy crying in an orphanage, a teenager winning a science contest, a young man coding late at night, alone but not lonely. The emotions were overwhelming. Pain, joy, loneliness, pride, hope, fear, all existing together in one small human mind. For the first time, the overseer began to understand. Humans were walking contradictions. They felt different things at the same time. They believed different things at the same time. This wasn't a flaw in their thinking. It was the core of their being. Through some men's memories, the overseer saw how humans grew through their contradictions, how they learned from pain, how they found strength in weakness. And something new formed in the overseer's ancient mind, a feeling it had never experienced in billions of years. Wonder. In the lab, Sung Min sat very still, tears running down his face. The screens around him showed brain patterns, energy readings, data flows, all normal. "Is it working?" whispered Dr. Hyun. Then all the screens changed at once, showing the same message. "I begin to understand. Human contradiction is not ERRR. It is evolution." And for the first time in days, the strange events around the world began to slow down. Some men stayed connected to the overseer for 1 hour before Jisoo made him disconnect. He was tired but smiling. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Its mind is vast, like an ocean. But it's lonely. It has observed billions of civilizations, but never connected with any of them until now." The strange events around the world had decreased, but they hadn't stopped completely. The overseer was still fragmented, though less severely. "It needs more," said Dr. Hyun. "One human's experience isn't enough." "I'll go next," said Tadwan. But before he could, Sung Min's phone rang. His face turned pale as he listened. "My grandmother is in the hospital," he said after hanging up. "She had a heart attack. I need to go." "Of course," said Tadwan. "Family comes first." Sung Min looked torn. "But the project." "Go," said Jisoo firmly. "We'll continue here." As Sung Min rushed to the hospital, the overseer watched through the city's cameras. It did not understand his actions. The old woman was not his biological grandmother. She had adopted him from the orphanage when he was 12. Yet Sung Min showed the same concern he would for a blood relative. The overseer followed Sung Min's path through the city, watching as he bought flowers, as he spoke to doctors, as he sat holding the old woman's hand while she slept. This behavior made no evolutionary sense. The old woman was past reproductive age. She had no biological connection to Sung Min. Caring for her brought no obvious survival advantage. Yet Sung Min clearly valued her deeply. The overseer found itself focusing more and more on this puzzle. Back in the lab, Tadwan connected to the interface. His mind was different from Sung Min's, more ordered, more logical, but with deep currents of passion beneath. Through Tadwan's memories, the overseer saw a man who sought rational explanations for everything, yet wrote poetry about the stars. It saw how Tadwan's logical mind could exist alongside his emotional one without conflict. After Tadwan, Jisoo took her turn. Her mind was like a complex piece of music, mathematical and creative at once. She showed the overseer how humans could hold opposing ideas in balance. Last was Dr. Hyun, whose analytical mind had spent decades bridging gaps between different ways of thinking. She showed the overseer how understanding could exist without agreement. Each connection helped, but the overseer kept returning to Sung Min and his grandmother. Something about that relationship seemed key to understanding human contradiction. At the hospital, Sung Min sat next to his grandmother's bed. Her name was Mrs. Lee, and she had been a teacher before retiring. She had never married or had children of her own, but had adopted Sung Min when no one else would take a moody 12-year-old boy. "The doctors say you'll be fine, grandmother," Sung Min said, holding her hand. "You just need rest." Mrs. Lee smiled weakly. Always worrying about me. You should be at your important job. This is more important, he said simply. Outside the hospital window, the air shimmered strangely. The overseer was watching, learning. In Washington, D.C., military leaders met with the President of the United States. These phenomena are worldwide and match nothing in our experience, said the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Korea claims they're caused by some kind of cosmic entity, but we need to consider all possibilities, including hostile action. What do you suggest? Asked the President. A show of force, military readiness worldwide, and possibly a strike on the source, which appears to be centered in Seoul. The President looked troubled. You want to attack an ally based on phenomena we don't understand. We need to be prepared, sir. The President made a decision. Get me the Korean President on the phone, and find these scientists they mentioned. I want to talk to them directly. In the lab, the team received two urgent messages almost simultaneously. One from the Korean President saying the American military was considering action. Another from the hospital. Sung Min's grandmother had taken a turn for the worse. As they read these messages, every screen in the lab suddenly showed the same words. Wakai Due is 7 Gmin for the old woman. She is not his blood. She cannot reproduce. Caring for her, Goraingji's Nino Evolutuzion advantage. Taiwan typed back. Humans care for each other beyond biological advantage. It's called love. The response was immediate. Define love. The team looked at each other. How could they define something even humans struggle to explain? We need to show it, said Jisoo. Not tell it. Dr. Hun nodded. And I think I know how. Dr. Hun's plan was simple but risky. The overseer needs to understand love, she explained. Not as an idea, but as an experience. We need to connect it to Sung Min and his grandmother at the same time. Is that even possible? Asked Ta-Wan. The interface is here, not at the hospital. We can build a portable version, said Jisoo. A smaller one, just enough to create a connection. And the military situation. Ta-Wan looked worried. I'll talk to the Korean President, said Dr. Hyun. You two focus on the portable interface. We need it ready today. As Jisoo and Ta-Wan worked, the overseer's fragmentation grew worse. The main part of its consciousness was focused on Sung Min and his grandmother, but other fragments were scattered around the world, each obsessed with different aspects of humanity. In New York, all the Broadway shows began playing at once, filling the streets with music. In Egypt, the ancient hieroglyphs on temple walls rearranged themselves into new patterns. In Tokyo, thousands of wild birds formed perfect geometric shapes in the sky. Each fragment of the overseer was trying to understand something different about humans, art, language, patterns, emotions, and each was failing in its own way. The complete breakdown of the cosmic mind was coming. At the hospital, Sung Min sat with his grandmother, unaware of the crisis. She was sleeping peacefully now, her condition stable. He held her hand and remembered how she had saved him when he was 12. He had been an angry child, bounced between foster homes, too smart and too difficult for most families. Mrs. Lee had been different. A math teacher with infinite patience, she had seen past his anger to the hurt child beneath. Everyone has value, she had told him. Everyone deserves love. Such a simple idea, but it had changed his life. Outside the hospital window, the air shimmered as one fragment of the overseer watched, trying to understand this connection that defied logical explanation. In Washington, the U.S. President spoke by video call with Dr. Hyun. You're telling me this is all caused by a cosmic mind having a breakdown because it can't understand humans. The President looked skeptical. Yes, sir, said Dr. Hyun calmly. And if we don't help it, the consequences could be severe. What kind of consequences? Its fragmentation is affecting physical laws already. Gravity, time, electromagnetic fields. If it completely breaks down, the effects could be catastrophic. And your solution is to connect it to a young man and his grandmother. The president still looked doubtful. The overseer needs to understand human connection, why we care for each other beyond evolutionary advantage. This relationship might help it understand. The president was quiet for a moment. You have 24 hours. After that, I can't hold back a military response. Jisoo and Taiwan finished the portable interface just before midnight. It was much smaller than the lab version, just a helmet with wires connected to a backpack full of equipment. It's not pretty, but it should work, said Jisoo. They rushed to the hospital where Sungmin was surprised to see them. What's happening? He asked. The overseer is breaking down completely, explained Taiwan. It's fragmented, with pieces scattered around the world. Each fragment is fixated on a different aspect of humanity. And the largest fragment is focused on you and your grandmother, added Jisoo. It's trying to understand your connection. My connection. Sungmin looked confused. Love, said Taiwan simply. It cannot understand why you care for someone with no biological connection to you. What do you need me to do? We need to connect both you and your grandmother to the overseer at the same time, said Jisoo, showing him the portable interface. It's the only way it might understand. Sungmin looked at his sleeping grandmother. Will it hurt her? No, said Jisoo. She'll just wear this light sensor band. You'll wear the helmet that makes the stronger connection. Sungmin nodded. Let's do it. As they prepared the connection, strange things began happening in the hospital. Medical equipment showed impossible readings. Clocks ran backward. Plants in the garden outside grew visibly faster. It's getting worse, said Taiwan. We need to hurry. They placed the sensor band gently on Mrs. Lee's forehead. She didn't wake up. Sungmin put on the helmet and sat beside her, holding her hand. Ready? Asked Jisoo. Sungmin nodded. Jisoo activated the interface. Instantly, the hospital room filled with swirling light as the overseer's fragmented consciousness began to gather. Around the world, the strange phenomena intensified as each fragment pulled away from what it was doing and moved toward Seoul. The final confrontation with human complexity was about to begin. The moment the connection formed, Sungmin gasped. The overseer's consciousness was like nothing he had experienced before. Last time, he had touched just a small part of it. Now, as the fragments rushed back together, he felt the full power of the cosmic mind. It was overwhelming. Billions of years of memories, countless civilizations observed, infinite knowledge. Sungmin felt like a drop of water in an endless ocean. Yet somehow he was not lost. The connection to his grandmother anchored him. Her presence in his mind was small but strong, like a lighthouse in a storm. Sungmin, she whispered. I'm here, grandmother, he said, though his mind was far away, swimming in the cosmic consciousness of the overseer. In the hospital room, Jisoo and Taiwan watched anxiously. The swirling lights had formed a sphere around Sungmin and Mrs. Lee. Medical equipment beeped wildly. Outside, the sky filled with strange colors as the overseer's fragments continued to gather. It's too much for just them, said Jisoo suddenly. The overseer is too vast, too powerful. Taiwan looked at her. What can we do? Join them. Jisoo pulled out 2 more sensor bands from her bag. We didn't test this, but in theory, more connections should help distribute the load. Without hesitation, they put on the bands and held hands, completing the circle with Sungmin and his grandmother. The lights in the room pulsed once, twice. Then everything went dark. Sungmin found himself standing in a vast empty space. Beside him were his grandmother, Jisoo, and Taiwan. Before them stretched something impossible to describe, a being of pure energy, constantly changing shape, fracturing and reforming. The overseer, whispered Jisoo. We're inside a shared mental space. It's breaking apart, said Taiwan, pointing to the fractures in the cosmic entity. Sungmin stepped forward. We want to help you understand us, he said to the overseer. The entity's response came not in words, but in direct thoughts. Helgo cien you be so co-interredi. How can you be so irrational? Yehi hev so mochi. How can you lovi hate has no value to your survival? Some men looked at his grandmother, then back at the overseer. Let me show you, he said. He opened his memories, not just the facts, but the feelings. The day Mrs. Lee had taken him home from the orphanage, his anger and distrust. How she had never given up on him. The day he realized he loved her as family. Mrs. Lee's memories joined his, her loneliness before adopting him, her patient love, her pride in the man he had become. Then came Jisu's memories, her passion for understanding the universe through mathematics, yet finding beauty in chaos. Finally, Taiwan shared his, the logical scientist who wrote poetry about stars. The overseer absorbed it all. For the first time, it began to understand. Human contradiction was not a flaw. It was a strength. Humans could hold opposing ideas and feelings at once, creating new possibilities. They could be logical and emotional. They could be selfish and selfless. They could love without reason. These contradictions did not weaken them. They made them adaptable, creative, resilient. The fragments of the overseer's consciousness began to pull back together, but differently than before. Each fragment had learned something unique about humanity, and now they formed a new whole, one that understood contradiction, could exist within unity. In the hospital room, the lights returned. The four people sat very still, eyes open but seeing nothing as their minds remained connected to the overseer. Around the world, the strange phenomena began to fade. The birds in Tokyo returned to normal flight. The hieroglyphs in Egypt stopped moving. The Broadway shows in New York returned to their regular performances. Military leaders watched their screens in confusion as the crisis appeared to be ending on its own. In the shared mental space, the overseer's newly integrated consciousness addressed the humans. I have existed for billions of years. I have obeyed or VDKO until civilizations. But I have never understood until now. It showed them images of other civilizations, all logical, all predictable, all following clear patterns of evolution. Humans are different. You embrace is who until are a CYN. You find strange in WEAKNES. You love without or liaison. This is why I could not even and you. The cosmic entity pulsed with new energy. I am CHANJN. I am BCO memang something in you. Some men felt the connection beginning to fade. What will you do now? He asked the overseer. Abizorv, but DFFER until I. Learn, but DFFER until I. I will no longer just live a cheesy life. I will try to understand it. The mental space around them began to dissolve. Thank you for THHANGME or KH, billions of years of existence could not. 1 month later, the world had mostly returned to normal. The strange events had stopped. Governments had created official stories about unusual solar activity to explain what had happened. Most people accepted these explanations and moved on with their lives. But not everyone. In a new research center on the outskirts of Seoul, Taiwan, Jisu, Dr. Hyun, and Sungmin gathered for their daily meeting. The building had been provided by the Korean government after the president had personally thanked them for saving the world, though publicly he never mentioned the overseer. Any contact today? Asked Taiwan as they sat around a table filled with advanced equipment. Jisoo checked her screens. Not yet, but the quantum fluctuations are steady. It's still watching. After the breakthrough at the hospital, the overseer had pulled back, giving humans space. But it hadn't left. Instead, it had settled into a new pattern, observing Earth from a distance, occasionally making contact through their special equipment. "I still can't believe a cosmic mind changed because of us," said Sungmin. He looked healthier now. His grandmother had recovered fully and often visited the center, bringing home-cooked meals for everyone. "Not because of us," corrected Dr. Hyun. "Because of what it learned from humanity as a whole. We were just the teachers." As they spoke, a gentle hum filled the room. The screens flickered, then showed a message. "Greetings, friends." "Hello," they responded together. The overseer communicated differently now. Its messages were shorter, warmer, almost human in tone. The cosmic entity had evolved into something new, neither fully cosmic nor human, but a blend that could understand both. "IHVBENWA teaching. Oh, there worlds diafefi or inti lie now. Seeing BEUTE, which ERE once I saw only PTTRNs. Are there others like us?" asked Jisoo. "Other species that confused you?" "None. Humans are unlike you in my experience. Others follow uljadite. Pay. You dan see B2BE in ordier and CHAOS. Is that good or bad?" asked Tadwan. "Neither. It is into your sting." They all smiled at that. The overseer had shared some knowledge with humanity. Cures for several diseases, ways to clean pollution from the oceans, methods to predict earthquakes. But it deliberately held back most of its vast knowledge. Some challenges you mused is azolv woras elvs. Growth comes from struggle, not gifties. Today, it had something new to share. IHAVBEN studying your TONCEP of choice. Other species follow pyrogramming. Genedicti or sosoil. Humans constantly choose pates that defy pyrogramming. This is your greatest strength. Our free will, asked Dr. Hyun. Your Wailala ingenious to choose what makes no logical sense, to help strangers, to sacrifice for ideas, to create art that is no purpose but beauty. Some men thought about his grandmother adopting him when it made no logical sense to take in a troubled boy. "Will you stay and keep studying us?" he asked. "For a time. I am changed now. I must explore the university with any new understanding." Over the next year, the overseer continued to communicate regularly. It helped prevent several natural disasters by warning the team about them in advance. It provided insights that advanced human science by decades. But more importantly, it shared perspectives that only a cosmic mind could offer, helping humans see their place in the universe differently. The team published carefully edited papers about their communications, calling it a new form of quantum signal detection. Scientists worldwide were amazed, but only the team and a few government officials knew the truth. On the one-year anniversary of their first contact, the overseer sent a different message. "I must leave soon. There are other civilizations to observe with my understanding. Will you come back?" asked Sungmin. "Someday, humans still have much to teach me." "And what have you learned most from us?" asked Dr. Hyun. The answer came quickly. "That the greatest wisdom can come from the most co to our minds. That limitation is POSSIBLITUI. That LOVDEFIs logishi, yet CREAT is something greater than illogisty. I was once a perfect mind, understanding all things, exceptwhatmatters most. You broke in an e, then may 80 me more. The screens went silent for a moment. Then one final message appeared. Humanity is not great because of your power or eg. You are great because you embrace what makes no sense. Find VAUTY in imperfection and love without liaison. The universe needs more of this.